Well, hey there. I am coming to you today with my Zelda t-shirt, and that is because today I'm going to talk about my favorite Nintendo games, because I've loved Nintendo since the age of 4, and nothing has changed. It's still my favorite console, and now I want to share with you guys some of my favorite games of all time. Hello everyone, it is Sam, and I hope you guys are having a great one. I am here today to talk about Nintendo, which is my all-time favorite console. I'm a very big Nintendo fan. I have been since the age of 4 when we got the Super Nintendo. We had the Nintendo Power subscription. I had, basically every console from Super Nintendo on up. A big Nintendo fan. So needless to say, I have some very all-time favorite Nintendo games, and I want to tell you guys what they are today. So today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my top 10 favorite Nintendo games. So this list is not really in any particular order except for the very last game. The very last game is my all-time favorite Nintendo game, but the rest are kind of in no particular order, but they are my favorites. So the number 10 is the Super Mario Brothers, which of course came out on Super Nintendo. It was literally the first game I ever played on any type of video game console. We got the Super Nintendo when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I remember my parents plugging it in and playing the game, and I was like, hey, can I try? And I remember that very first moment where I held a Super Nintendo controller and I played Super Mario Brothers. And I remember saying, wow, this controller makes my hands sweaty. No idea why I remember that, but I do, even though it wasn't very old. But that was kind of what started my love for Nintendo and all of the games. I love them so much because they were so much fun. But Super Mario Brothers always have a special place in my heart because it was my very first game I ever played. Which brings me to number 9, which is another favorite for a similar reason, and that is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This was not only my second Nintendo game I ever played because we got it at the same time, but also my very first Zelda game, which started my love affair for the franchise. I have played the original Nintendo Zelda games, but I don't like them as much as the ones from A Link to the Past on. They're also really hard, but I appreciate them for starting the franchise, and I appreciate them for the history. But A Link to the Past is definitely one of my favorites because I loved that game growing up. It was just, I was in love with the storyline, I was in love with the gameplay. I played it through several times growing up, and it was just so much fun. I loved it so much, and I really like the sequel they came out with for the 3DS, which is A Link Between Worlds, because it was like nostalgia heaven. It reminded me of my childhood, so definitely a favorite. Number 8 is going to the Animal Crossing franchise, specifically Animal Crossing New Leaf for the 3DS. This is hands down my favorite Animal Crossing game thus far. I love this game so much. I love how you can just build up your town and make it look the way you want it to, and you have villagers moving in and out, and you kind of get your dreamies, which are like your dream villagers, and it's just a lot of fun. This one is definitely my favorite. I also like that with the 3DS, they can come out with updates for the game without having to purchase new games. That's been kind of cool. I have been neglecting my village, however, so I don't even want to look at it. I'm sure it's full of weeds, and I'm sure my hair looks like a mess, and I have to get it done again, but it's definitely a fun game, and one I clearly need to get back to playing. Number 7, I am giving to Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life. Now, Harvest Moon 64 was my very first Harvest Moon game, and I do love it. It has a very special place in my heart because it was a very fun game, and for me it was revolutionary. For some reason I never played it on the Super Nintendo, but I really, of all of the Harvest Moon games, have to say A Wonderful Life is my favorite. And A Wonderful Life came out on the GameCube, and it was brilliant because you basically started out as a young man. They came out with a female version later on, but the original one was the guy character. So you start out with a young man, and you can grow to an old age, and you can get married and have kids, and then your kid can take over the farm, and then you can start playing as your kid. So it was a pretty cool concept, and the scenery in this game was gorgeous. It's hands down the most beautiful Harvest Moon game. The only complaint I had about this game was that it took forever to get through. So this game spanned years, but the days were so long. They shortened the months. I think like the months were only 12 days, but the days, it would take you like over an hour to get through one day. And I never ended up beating it because it took so long to get through a day. So I think that if they would have shortened the days, the game would have been a lot more fun. But it was still definitely one of the most beautiful Harvest Moon games. They had a variety of different cows that you could get, like different looking cows, which I thought was brilliant. And it was a beautiful, fun game. And I wish they would kind of re-release it, but update it, like making the days shorter. But it still remains one of my favorite just because it was so pretty. It was a pretty Harvest Moon game. Number 6 is going to Mario Kart Double Dash. So Mario Kart I have loved since the very first one. I remember when it came out on Super Nintendo and I was obsessed with it. We rented it from the video store back when video stores still existed. And I remember we had to return it, and I remember I kept bugging my parents about getting it, and then I ended up getting it for my birthday. So I've always loved Mario Kart, but My favorite is actually Double Dash for the GameCube. I think this one is completely underrated. It was such a brilliant concept of having two people in the car, and like I got so good at like switching the players, and like you could have two items, and the tracks were really fun. So this one is definitely my favorite, but Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U is kind of taking a close second because that one reminds me the most of Double Dash. But I feel like Double Dash is so underrated and nobody ever talks about it, but it's seriously like the best Mario Kart game. Number 5 is going to Quest 64, which was one of our very first Nintendo 64 games, aside from, of course, you know, Mario 64. But Quest 64 was an RPG, and I remember thinking it was so beautiful because everything was in 3D, and just the storyline was really cool, and it had like the turn-based battle systems, which I really, really like turn-based battle systems in RPGs. It's a really fun game, and the magic concept in the game was a lot of fun, and it's just one you never hear anybody talking about, but one that I think is very underrated, and I wonder if it's in the Virtual Console because I wouldn't mind replaying it again. It was a fun one. Number 4 is going to another Nintendo 64 game, and that is Adventure Beetle Racing, and hands down one of my favorite racing games. Adventure Beetle Racing came out about the same time that the new Volkswagen Beetles came out, and it was basically a racing game for the Volkswagen Beetle, but it was hilarious. First of all, the tracks were awesome. Second, the announcer guy was hilarious because he would basically sit there and mock you, especially if you were in last place, and like say, hit the pedal to the metal, and it was just really funny. But then also how he would introduce each track was hilarious. Like he had a different voice for each one. So it was like Coventry Cove. And then the mountain one, he was like Mount Mayhem. And it was just catered towards whatever the track was, but it was a hilarious one, and you could like completely customize your Beetle. And then once you beat the game, you would get the cop Volkswagen Beetle, and then you could play the sirens and all of the other cars would pull over. So you'd basically always be in first place. But I really, really love this one. I wish I would release it on the Virtual Console because I miss playing it, though we still have the 64, but I just need to like hook it up. Anyway, but it's a fun game, and yet another one that you never hear anybody talking about, but it was so much fun. And the next one I'm giving to nostalgia, which was a DS game that I had. It was an RPG game. The game takes place in an alternate history, steampunk Victorian era London, and it basically follows this kid who is trying to set out in his airship to find his adventuring father. And he is joined, of course, by other characters, and it was a lot of fun. It was sometimes humorous. It kind of reminded me of like a steampunk version of Chrono Trigger almost, but I really enjoyed it. I really, really did. I kind of want to replay it because it's been forever since I played it, but it was a lot of fun. Plus I like the steampunk elements, and it was turn-based battle system, which I really like, so this was another one that was one of my favorites. My second to last favorite Nintendo game is, of course, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This was another Nintendo 64 video game, but it kind of redefined the Zelda franchise, I think. It was so fantastic in what it did for the franchise. I mean, first of all, the graphics, of course, were like gorgeous because you're in 3D now, and the storyline was amazing. You start out as a kid and then you end up as adult Link, and just everything about the game, the storyline, the gameplay, the world was just amazing. I absolutely love this game so much. Plus, can we just talk about for a minute, because nobody ever addresses it, but you know when you're adult Link and Hyrule Town's kind of like desolate and deserted, and there's those creepy zombie things that jump onto your back? That scared the hell out of me. Like, they still freak me out. I remember getting so stressed out when I'd have to run through there and you hear one scream and then you freeze and then it jumps in your back and tries to strangle you. That used to freak me out, and nobody ever talks about that. Those were freaky, freaky bad guys. But anyway, aside from that, I love this game. I actually own it on my 3DS. They re-released it for the 3DS. I also liked Majora's Mask, but I didn't like it as much as Ocarina of Time, but Ocarina of Time was pretty damn great. So this now brings me to my #1 all-time favorite Nintendo game, and that is Earthbound, also known as Mother 3, I believe, in Japan. I think this is actually the third one in Japan, but it was the only one to be released in the United States. Came out on the Super Nintendo. They've also finally released it on the Virtual Console. And I love this game so much. It also takes place kind of like in an alternate reality London, and it follows this kid, Ness, after an alien invasion. He kind of sets out to save the world with his group of friends. I love this game. It is quirky, it is funny, has a lot of funny dialogue. A lot of the bad guys are hilarious. It's just a lot of fun. I highly recommend it if you have a Wii U. Get it on the Virtual Console. It's only like $5, and it is seriously one of the best RPGs. It is brilliant. We still have it, but our Super Nintendo doesn't work anymore, so I'm glad they re-released it for the Virtual Console, because this game is like I love it so much. I played it through so many times, and I'm actually in the middle of playing it through again, though I haven't played it in like a month or two. I need to get back to it because it's a fun one, guys, and if you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend that you do because it is so much fun. And I wish they would release the rest of them over in the US. I know they've tried to in the past, but like there's a translation issue because there's a lot of dialogue and it gets expensive, but I would love to see the rest of the other games make it over here because it is so much fun. All right, guys, that is it for my top 10 of favorite Nintendo games. You have to let me know if you have played any of these and if you think they're fun or what your favorite Nintendo game is. I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great one. Until next time, bye.